today is Qaalfa Dibeehi, who is Managing Partner of Human2outcome, that transforms mindsets of leaders to modify their behavior to help in growth mindset. And with that, I would like to speak to you a little bit about that specific point. Gallup has recently, or maybe at the beginning of the year, published a research that says that people are really unhappy. And I want to understand, why do leaders not put an effort? Some, I would say, or maybe perhaps the majority, I don't know, would put an effort into the well-being of their employees with a growth mindset.
Well, I think, if you talk to most, I think they would probably think that they value that. They have the words, they would say those things. But when it comes right down to it, they have OKRs, they have KPIs, they have other things, they have their traditional learning that they've gone through to get to where they are. And, what you will typically learn is, of course, in business, you have to hit some numbers. So at the core, there's that. And I think most employees understand that is kind of where they fit in, need to help the organization hit those numbers. I think the advanced way of thinking, of course, is that you don't get those numbers unless people do something. And so the trick is, people don't really follow numbers so closely. It's much more difficult to manage people by numbers. So you kind of have a little bit of sometimes a inherent conflict on how you measure and track progress. It's much easier to look at those numbers and to try to do things that way. And I guess getting back to your question, when you look at the wellness of employees, I don't think anyone would say that they're against that. But when it comes right down to it, it's difficult to put a number next to it. You can measure things around it, how many sick days, if you want to put it in those terms. You can measure things around it, but those numbers don't typically equate to actual wellness of employees, which is now, if you get into, it starts to sound a bit soft, the vibe of the place, the culture, these things start to sound a bit soft-ish. And of course, there are metrics, but those metrics don't add up to the culture. It's a gestalt thing that happens with the culture. So when you're leading a place, you kind of have to have a belief that culture does, in fact, eat strategy for breakfast. And you have to have a belief that doing these things will impact people in a positive way. And that positive impact will then drive efficiencies and other things you have in the business. And that mindset is kind of what's required in order to get there. So I think on the surface, everyone would agree. In practice, it's because it's difficult to literally measure. It afterwards, in the long run, if you look back 2 years, you definitely see it. But when you're standing here looking forward and you're trying to make some difference in the next quarter, it's very difficult to pinpoint.
The individual who becomes a leader is actually someone who was an employee. What happens in the process after they move from maybe mid-seniority to actually C-suite? Why did their mindset actually shift into just caring about strategies, or we're talking about people who only cared about strategies and not their well-being?
I just think it's the level of responsibility that you have and what's, in a sense, been heaped upon you by the organization. So every step, you've achieved something typically, unless it's the most progressive organization. Typically, if you think about the cultural fit versus the performance grid kind of matrix, you definitely in no organization do you tend to move up, and if you're not high on the performance side of things. And in many organizations, you can move up even if you're not that high on the cultural fit side of things, or the empathy and all of that side of things. So I think what happens is the responsibility gets greater. As the responsibility gets greater and you shoulder that responsibility, and the way it's been framed for you is, again, going back to the original point, hit these numbers and things. So as that gets going, if you've, for whatever reason, didn't get exposed by the right mentor, coach, leader, training, whatever you want to call it, to kind of help you to understand how to get to those numbers in a sustainable way, if you don't develop that philosophy early enough or deeply enough, then you kind of you're clutching. It's a difficult job, right? So you're trying to get to ways that get there, and so you start to rely on things that give you information, and the information that you're getting are I mean, I'm using numbers as a kind of a generalized term, but you're starting to use those numbers to kind of help you get there, and those people that help you achieve those numbers are those people who you tend to promote, and those people then learn that they need to hit those numbers. So it's a game that's going on now. I'm not saying those numbers are not important. They are absolutely important. I think the only difference here is risk mitigation and sustainability. What we find, and this is all over the place, companies that do look at employee well-being or have, I would call it servant leadership as a basic principle. If you look at those leaders who actually practice that, you find that their employees are happier, which again, you could say that's a little bit too soft, but happier means more engaged, more passionate. They believe in more strongly what the organization is actually about, and they're willing to give more to achieve that. And that's really the ultimate aim. Now, how do you measure that? Again, can be difficult.
What then would you advise someone a leader to actually reach that dream, making sure their employees are more engaged, etc.?
I would say, the first thing is you see all these memes. The first thing is let's not get confused between management and leadership or leaders. Leaders lead people. That's at least that's the way that I see things. Managers manage things, processes, and so forth. If you are in fact a leader, the whole point for a leader is to get other people so enthused, excited about whatever it is you're trying to accomplish that they are happy and willing to go the extra mile to get that thing accomplished. And that's where you get these efficiencies and the sustainability. So I would first of all say that just to recognize that's what leadership is about. It's a people thing. I don't care whether you're in the digital space or whatever other space you're in, it's a people thing at the end of the day. So that's the first step. The second thing is once you recognize that, then you have to pay attention to people. It's a difficult part of management side is the people, because it's, they come in all shapes, forms, sizes, and different life situations. And those things actually impact the team, that actually impact what you're trying to accomplish. So I guess the point I would say is that if you're taking your team or you're building a team or you're putting those people taking them into consideration and putting them foot first, then what you should be doing is investing in people. Regardless of whatever you're trying to accomplish, invest in people. And that means helping them to understand what you are about, getting them inspired about the vision, having a vision yourself, of course, but getting other people to be inspired by that vision, and then helping them to understand how they can contribute. And if that happens, then I think the people side of the equation is much easier.
I once worked with a client who tried to do all of that, but in fact, the employees hated them even more because of the financial aspect of it. So they're like, oh, get us cake in the office, but if you're not paying me well, I don't want your cake. So where does that lie? Because it seems like, as you said, a lot of people think they're doing well, but they aren't. There is always this part where I put in effort, but still my employees maybe don't want this kind of effort. So how do you make sure that you're giving people what they actually want?
Well, let me just the analogy. So, cake sliders and foosball in the office are not what I'm talking about. I think those are great things if you have them. And typically, we kind of got this with the internet startup type companies who kind of add this flavor to offices, and the free snacks and the free this and the free that. I think all are great, but it doesn't add up to employee well-being. I think what we're really talking about here is really understanding your employees. Now, every employee wants more money. That's a given. No matter how much you pay, they always want more money. But there's also lots of research that shows it's not the most important thing. Giving people lots of money and they're still unhappy, they're still burnt out, they're still quiet quitting, they're still looking for other jobs that have more money. It's important, and you have to recognize how short you are, what's the shortfall between whatever their expectation is and what you're giving. Now, the way to make up that expectation is paying attention to well-being. If people feel a sense of purpose. So here's a question to kind of, this is kind of what I put to companies. Why is it that, say, some music companies are able to pay, starting staff next to nothing? They're almost having to pay to work for the company because they love music, if that's what the company is about, because they love it, because they absolutely love being there. Now, they won't stay there forever under those circumstances, but they will stay there for a long time and be happy to do it for the opportunities. And you find other companies in certain instances where people are willing to go the extra mile for whatever pay that they have. Sometimes it's quite high pay. I can think my point here is that when we're talking about motivating employees, what we're really talking about here is the culture of the place, the work environment. So now people talking about ways of working and other kinds of things, which are aspects of that. But the key point here is that you have to, as you said, take employees, understand your employees, what they're actually after. You always know that money is going to figure into that equation, but you also know that there are other things. And many times, in many instances, people don't know the other things. They know there's money, and they know there's a little bit of recognition. And recognition is they know reward. I think fewer companies know about or actually practice true recognition. They, employee of the year, employee of the month, maybe, but not true recognition. They don't have room, offer opportunities for growth, and they don't really offer opportunities for people to learn and advance in their careers. And in some instances, they're afraid if they do that, those people have been more employable, and therefore they'll leave. And so, what's our investment worth if we invest in people who then leave? Um, you kind of, again, you have to have a belief in this, and you have to understand how things sort of work. I mean, nothing keeps a person in a role forever. What keeps them in the role is if they're interested. Of course, if they can kind of maintain or achieve the level of lifestyle that they're looking for. But if they are, again, I would just say enthused and engaged. If you have a sense of that, that's then you're on the right path. Level of engagement and sense. I mean, we hear the term quiet quitting quite a bit, which is just the opposite of engagement, right? And it's silent non-engagement. I mean, who publicly, shows that they are quiet quitting, but it's out there, and we now know we have a term now to articulate what has been happening for a while. So I think, again, going back to these are the things that can get there. It's really about paying attention to employees, understanding, have a better understanding of what it is that actually motivates them, and also, I guess, understanding what you want them to be motivated about. Sometimes it's difficult for companies to even articulate that. They have a product, they have a service. Is that what it is? They sometimes have lofty words about their values or their vision. But if you talk to employees of the business, they don't feel that in their sort of day to day. So there's a gap there. And I think if you can link those, it's much better.
I would definitely love to ask you a lot about customer service, but I'm not going to tap into that. However, I would want to ask you, is there an equilibrium where companies make sure they can provide the good service and invest in their employees? Because after speaking to a few people, I realized that there's this mindset of either or. It's either we invest in our employees or we invest in our customers. I don't know, what do you think about that? But also, is there an equilibrium that makes sure that companies can provide both?
So in the early days of customer experience, it was really a focus. I mean, the whole term customer experience comes because it started off talking about the end customer. Um, and then there is this sort of, I guess, internal movement within the field of where do employees come in. And it was kind of a split: employee experience, customer experience. Now we sort of say customer experience, we actually mean target audience experience. And there's a realization that no customer experience happens without employees. Now, I don't mean the frontline employees. I just mean employees of a business. So whatever happens with customers comes because the plumbing of that business works to get whatever comes on the back end of that plumbing. So employee experience is crucial and necessary for customer experience. Can you invest in both? Well, it depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about bells and whistles, it's very difficult to invest, right? Bells and whistles and employee experience would be as you mentioned earlier, you know, the free food, the foosball, the whatever else that you can offer in the office. That's kind of the bells and whistles. So when you're recruiting people, you show them the office. We have this, we provide this, we provide that, and you try to get us to get a sense that we really take care of our people. That's the bells and whistles side of employee experience. And the same thing on customer experience. There's bells and whistles in customer experience as well. You see quite a bit out there. The true work of customer experience and employee experience is not about bells and whistles. That's a bit closer to marketing of an experience versus the actual experience. You have to, of course, customer experience and employee experience is a business discipline. You have to take into consideration the reality of whatever business you're in, the margins you have, the cash flow you have, and so forth. So you're not able to do everything. Some companies cannot afford, you know, big tech on every possible thing, even though tech offers lots of opportunities. Sometimes you can't afford to provide the free snacks in the office. So all those things are regular business decisions. The point here is, given your circumstances, are there things that you can do to pay attention to create a better experience for employees, so that employees understand that in a sense you have their back, that you're really concerned with them? And frankly, if there's an amount of transparency and honesty within an organization, most employees kind of understand the general state of the business, and also understand when a business is not able to do maybe certain things. But if again, that vibe, the culture of that place is supportive and they feel engaged, they more or less can overlook or at least delay the need to have some of those things that they would wish for. And that's kind of what the whole company can be working towards. I think that's kind of where you get to things. So going back to your question, is it an either or? It's not an either or. They are intimately connected. The business needs to understand what customers need, want, and expect. And in fact, same thing with employees. And I would say generally there's three basic questions that a business needs to ask, and you can ask this for any target audience, whether that's employees, clients, customers, sponsors, whoever. One is, what is it that they expect? What do they expect? When I'm interacting with the business as an employee, when I'm interacting with the business, what do I expect as this? And you can't answer for them. You kind of have to pay attention to what the answer is from them. Two is, what is the experience they actually get? This is a different question than what experience am I delivering? It's what experience are they getting? What do they perceive is happening? Again, that could be for employees. What do employees think is happening in this company with their work life? What do customers think is happening? So that's the third. And the third question is, what do we want them to experience? What do we intend for them to experience? So as a company, have we said we want our experience to be transparent, authentic, and open? If that's what we've said, is it? So that's one thing. So you have these aims, and typically you will have gaps between what they want, what they expect, and what they actually, how they perceive is what they're getting. And there will be a gap between what you intend for them to get and what they perceive they are getting. And it's the management of those gaps that is where leaders come in. Leaders are perceptive to these three. These gaps will never be eliminated, never, ever, but they can be minimized or optimized to whatever level is acceptable by a particular company or leader. And that's the real work in all this. It's the realization that you're paying attention to these questions and constantly monitoring them, because situations change and the gaps change. And as you're doing that, that's where you're making your adjustments as a leader.
Wouldn't it be easier just to, you know, put in some technology to replace people and just not have to go through all of this?
If technology could, I mean, technology does do certain things, and it is replacing certain roles and jobs. We already know that. That's the lay of the land, and that is happening. But bottom line, at the end of the day, people are responsible for value creation, and people are responsible for value destruction. So we're not yet at a point where you can just punch a button and a business grows out of AI and it works with other AI to generate income for people who just sit back and do nothing.
That's the dream.
It's people at the end of the day. So with that, yes, things can become more efficient, but as things can become more efficient, there's also risks with all the new things that are out there. And we're starting, I mean, we have signs of that. Just taking AI as an example, there's signs of that, right? There's risks that if you take some biases that people have, AI doesn't eliminate those bias, it magnifies the bias that people has. So it's this risk profile that we're playing around with. And it's where you want to make the risk. But at the end of the day, if you need people to spend their money, as an example, then you need to pay attention to people, and not people's AI. It's people that will make these decisions. And that's a fundamental point of view. And so the key point of all of this is understand what motivates people and understand what demotivates people, whether they are employees or whether they are customers.
Qaalfa, thank you very much for joining me. It was a pleasure speaking to you today.
Okay, now see ya. Bye bye.